Are you working? What kind of work do you do?
Hey guys, so our next video in the series is Cellular Respiration. Mr. Farside here, going to talk to you guys a little bit about this whole entire process. Alright, so let's get right into it. So the learning objectives for this video are pretty simple. There's only 3 of them. So the first thing I want you to be able to do is to write the equation that represents cellular respiration, and again, it's the opposite of photosynthesis. Second thing I'd like you to be able to do is to describe all of the sub-processes that occur in cellular respiration, glycolysis being one, the Krebs cycle being another, and then of course the electron transport chain. And the third thing I want you to be able to do is to be able to identify these key molecules that play a part in those 3 processes. And not only to identify them, but then to be able to take those things and say, okay, this molecule does this. So we're going to be able to describe their roles. So why is this an important process? Well, I picked a picture that would kind of be indicative of this whole process. Okay, so we have some animals here sitting on plants, and we have some animals eating plants. And this is really a great picture. So we have the idea that animals and plants are related in some way. They are dependent on one another. We are more dependent on plants than they are of us. But we use the byproducts they provide, and they use the byproducts we provide. But specifically, it's a good one because not only do plants undergo photosynthesis, they also undergo cellular respiration. So they do have mitochondria in their cells, just like we do. Those things are obviously undergoing cellular respiration. And the chloroplasts that are only found in plant cells are undergoing photosynthesis. So just to give you guys an idea, here are the types of organisms we're looking at. This is the Paul Phlagicus monkey, and of course the Brielle vivianicus monkey as well. So just my way of having a little fun with you guys. Hope you don't take it too seriously. So what's the equation? The equation that we're thinking about is this guy. Okay, so we have a glucose molecule here. Okay, a C6H12O6. We have a glucose molecule going and being used in conjunction with a oxygen molecule, and then we have these 3 processes that are in the middle here. And what I'm trying to show you guys here is that there are 3 distinct steps, and they're color coded, and that'll make sense a little bit later when we talk about the 3 different sub processes. And what we're yielding here is some carbon dioxide and some water, and then of course energy. Energy in the form of what? Well, energy in the form of ATP. So if you don't know this yet, please pause and learn it. Figure out whatever way it is that you're going to be able to learn this equation, whether you memorize it, you write it down, you make a diagram, note card, whatever it is, you go ahead and do that, and make sure that you pause it, take a second to review it. We'll be waiting on the other side. So welcome back. So what's the end game here? So what is the ultimate product of cellular respiration? Well, it is, of course, ATP, and that's the thing that we're after. We're just after ATP. ATP provides a phosphate molecule and the energy contained in that phosphate molecule to do all the things that your body does. And it does that in specific ways. Part of the way that it makes ATP is by using other things that we get from the food we eat to make those. So let's take a look at those guys in just a sec. Before we do that, it's important to understand that when we eat our food, okay, it doesn't come in a form that we can use it. So we have to rip it apart and convert it into something else. So that's why our bodies and our cells undergo cellular respiration. Simply because the glucose molecule that we take in from food, as it's broken down by our stomach acid into the glucose molecule, we can't use it just as glucose. We have to break it apart and then make it into other stuff, and then that other stuff is the stuff that our bodies use. So again, the end game here, we're trying to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So where does all this happen? Well, it happens in the mitochondria. So here is a picture of a mitochondria. So here's a actual microscopic image taken with a microscope of a real mitochondria, and here's this, a computer-generated image of a mitochondria. And let's make sure that we understand a couple different parts here. So the intracellular matrix, this is part of the, just the fluid that's inside the mitochondria. We have these little tiny folds, all these little areas right in here, okay, where I'm kind of drawing with my pen here, and notice that I'm looking at where I'm drawing and not at you guys on the screen. But those things are called cristae, and they're just like the little folds. And if we look at it up here, this would be a cristae right up in here. Let me see if I can draw this little guy right here. Okay, that's a cristae. and it's just folds in the inner parts of the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria is a cool kind of little organelle because it has not only one membrane, but it has two membranes. Again, this is a eukaryotic cell that we're talking about here, and this is one of the organelles in that eukaryotic cell. And one of the main features of eukaryotic cells is that they have membrane-bound organelles. So the mitochondria doesn't just have an outer membrane, this guy out here, which I kind of just drew on the inner membrane there a second ago. So not only the outer membrane right here, but it also has this inner membrane, so this portion right here. And that inner membrane is the part where the electron transport chain is located, and that's another site of ATP production. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Okay, so how do we do this process? Well, first we know we got to eat some food. This is one of my favorite foods. It's one of my guilty pleasures. It's called a Chicago hot dog. It was developed in Chicago. Some guy made it, and it's become a popular thing. But it has all different types of little vegetables and little things on it. Okay, but as we eat this, we're getting all these different macromolecules. I'm getting proteins. I'm getting sugars. I'm getting fats. And again, those things come to us in a way that our body can't use. So how do we go ahead and break these things down? Well, first we need to eat some food, and then it obviously gets digested in our stomachs, and the hydrochloric acid or stomach acid breaks it down into littler parts, and those littler parts get shipped to all the different places via our bloodstream, specifically into the cells. So let's take a look at what some of the players are in this. Well, the very first one, when we eat, we obviously get glucose. Okay, we get some sugars from the foods that we eat. The second thing we get, or the second player in all this, in the end product, is this thing called ATP. So if I look at this, here is the TP part of it. Okay, so here are the three phosphate molecules. Here's 1, 2, and 3. So, and then this is the adenosine molecule over here, and this is the triphosphate. Okay, so those are those guys. Now, the other one that's at play here is oxygen. Now, we talked a little bit about this, okay? So here's atomic oxygen. This is just an atom of oxygen. It's one oxygen atom. We can't use that. We use diatomic or atmospheric oxygen. Let me get this back. Or atmospheric oxygen, okay? And 3 oxygen molecules put together would be a molecule of ozone. So just to let you understand and let you know that it's not just when we say oxygen we mean one thing. We actually mean diatomic oxygen, and this is the atmospheric oxygen that we breathe. So some more players in this. We have one thing called NADH, and we'll call him NAD, or nicotinamide adenosine. Jesus, I wrote this big long thing down. Let me get it. Hang on, guys. So it's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. That's a long, ridiculously complex word. I don't want you guys to memorize that. All I want you to refer to it as is NAD. The next one, okay, this is called flavin adenine dinucleotide, or FAD. The H on the end of each of these refers to this guy, which is hydrogen. Now, he's probably the most important player in this because what we're after is hydrogen's electron. Okay, so here's an electron. There's one proton in a hydrogen molecule, and there's one electron. And these electrons are the most excitable thing, and those are the things that give us energy. Okay, think about it. Electricity equals energy. Electrons equal energy. So we're after the electrons and what the electrons can do for us. And when we break apart an ATP molecule, the electrons that are released is the energy that we use. Okay, so that's really the long and short of it, is that when we break an ATP molecule apart, we get those high energy electrons that are excited. And there's a whole process that occurs. But while the electron is the most important guy, I want you to focus on NAD and FAD. And we'll call these guys our buddies, NAD and FAD. And these are responsible for taking these hydrogens and releasing these electrons, or these high energy electrons, which are so vitally important to us. But more on that in a minute. So if you remember a little while ago, I talked to you guys about color coding. So when we produce ATP, we do it in 3 ways. Okay, we have a process called glycolysis. We have a process called the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle. And then we also have this process of the electron transport chain. So this guy right here is the electron transport chain. This guy right here is the Krebs cycle. And these happen inside the mitochondria. Krebs cycle happens in the mitochondrial matrix, and the electron transport chain happens on the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And then we have this third process called glycolysis, okay? And this happens outside in the cytoplasm of the cell. Now notice that they're color coded, right? So we have a blue color here, we have this pinkish color, and we have this like purplish blue color. Well, again, that's why I color coded the arrows. Okay, so there's three processes here, and those again are indicative of these three guys. We have glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. So glycolysis is producing ATP by breaking apart glucose. It takes glucose, it rips it apart into a 3-carbon molecule. So glycolysis is, again, right here, if we look at this word, we have glyco and lyse. So if we split those two words up, glyco meaning glucose, lysis meaning to break apart, we're taking a 6-carbon glucose molecule and we're breaking it into a 3-carbon, pyruvate or pyruvic acid molecule. And this happens, again, in the cytosol or in the cytoplasm of the cell. And that produces an ATP. Also, we have the citric acid cycle and the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle kind of does very much the same thing, only it uses our friends NAD and FAD up here, okay, to go ahead and use these guys to provide electrons for the process of building ATP. And then, of course, when we use ATP and we break those apart, we get those electrons back. The third step is the electron transport chain, and it pretty much says exactly what it does. Using NAD and FAD, it transports electrons to make ATP. Now, of these three processes, we get tons of ATP from this one. But the bottom line is that all three processes are happening in the cell, 2 in the mitochondria, 1 outside in the cytoplasm, and all of these processes completely make ATP. Okay, so here's your quick quiz. What are the 3 processes that make ATP? And then finally, I want you guys to write me a paragraph that talks to me about all of the players that are used in this process of cellular respiration to create ATP. I would suggest pausing, going back to what the players are, and we'll figure out a little bit how this occurs based on those slides. So rewind it, play it again, rewind it, play it again. It'll always be here. Another tool, again, go to Google. If you don't understand how NAD and how FAD are used, go to Google and type in how is NADH used in the body, how is FADH used in the body, and it'll give you a great example. All right, talk to you guys on the morrow. Deuces.